let me just say a little bit about Bocafloja. He's an interdisciplinary artist of Afro-Indigenous descent based in the Bronx, New York. He uses mediums like documentary filmmaking, music, literature, and photography to address issues in the global South like decoloniality, critical race theory, and African diaspora in Latin America. He has also been a fixture at the festivals, Trinity festivals of the past. He has attended, definitely many that we're going to be talking about. And his film, most recent film, critically acclaimed recent documentary film, Bravado Magenta, which came out in 2019, was featured at this year's festival, followed by a Q&A between Bocafloja and myself, as well as our online listeners. So welcome to Living Hip Hop. All right, that was a long introduction. You're very patient. So listen, it's really good to have you. But before we get into this, let me just kind of show the audience the trailer to your film, since that was the featured, and that's all we're going to give them, that little taste. So if y'all just give me a second. All right. So then we have the trailer to Bravado Magenta here with Bocafloja, the filmmaker. You know what? I interviewed you already, you know what I mean, man? So I'm going to pass the mic to my co-host, Kaim, because I know you wanted to also. I wish you were there in that conversation, so I'm glad we're having this conversation now. But Kaim, can you just start off, not with a question, but you were a viewer, you were in the audience watching the film, interacting on the chat. Can you just talk about that experience? And then what questions you got for Bocafloja?
So let me start with the experience. Y'all getting the echo? 1, 2.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so let me start with the experience. It was not a regular movie. It was like a multimedia, scholarly experience. It was like Kanye level, like creating something new. And y'all, I think if you may have missed it, you may have caught it, but if you go back and even look at that trailer clip, you'll see that when someone's speaking in English, there's Spanish subtitles. When someone's speaking in Spanish, there's English subtitles. Usually, no matter how big the budget is on a film, they have one language and they have one subtitle. And when they switch to the other language, they remove the subtitles. So let's say it's English speaking, right? They'll have Spanish subtitles, but then if they switch to Spanish, they wouldn't have English subtitles. There's subtle things like that a hip hop scholar such as Bocafloja resonates. As we're watching it, we're like, oh, you're keeping a cipher going, is what you're doing. You're not just saying, oh, we have this and then we take it off. You're saying, how do we include this person and then we switch this person gets the mic, how do we still keep the next person in the cipher still included? Subtle things like that. Speaking about gender and race and class issues, but often reasserting the same unconscious symbols and the same unconscious reactions that we have. Whereas in Bocafloja's case, you have a cartoon running wild while a woman is speaking. You might have a white presenting or black presenting man speaking, and there's a woman showing, or it might be a black presenting or white presenting man or Asian. You don't know what's happening. So again, there's all these elements of the cipher, of the rupture, of the disruption, of challenging you, right? And I'm gonna admit, the last part I'll say about the experience before I ask you some questions, bro, is it was challenging for me. As I was first watching it, I was like, what is going on here? Is that the person talking? Like, who's talking? What is this? What is the cartoon? And then I realized these are the questions that in this particular project, we always talk about hip hop is engaging, and KRS-One always talks about you can't just talk about hip hop, you got to do it. So Seth and I talk about this a lot as we're teaching hip hop. How do you make sure we're not just talking about hip hop, but engaging? And you literally did that. There's nothing to get deep about in my analysis. Anyone who understands what I just said, you literally go through that when you're watching this film. You have to ask yourself who is speaking. And then you start asking yourself, why am I assuming who's speaking? And what does that mean? What are the assumptions that I make about voice and body and presence and authority? So I really appreciated that. And I want to say, you know, sometimes we don't give flowers, but sometimes it's just like fake compliments. I'm not saying like, hey, you're really cool and I know you from the festival. I'm saying like you achieved a hip hop way of engaging people, even while they think they're just sitting down to be passive.
Yeah.
Like that is the goal of hip hop scholarship, of hip hop filmmakers. So I wanted to salute you and give you your kudos. You did something which there wasn't a lot of precedent for doing, bro. Right?
Yeah.
So I guess that would be my first question. Like, how much of that was a challenge for you, knowing you were doing something unprecedented in your style, and how much of you was intentionally saying, I got to do this in a hip hop way where it's engaging and it's challenging people, versus just this is just a cool thing to do, and and suffices overthinking it.
No, no, no. I first of all, thank you for your kind words. I mean, um, we're kind of like accustomed to a very specific format when it comes to documentary filmmaking, in which there's usually like a voiceover trying to control the narrative. The audience is usually passive, as you mentioned. There's always like a power imbalance. You know, there's an object of study which is quite passive, and there's someone, you know, creating the whole path and the flow of the conversation. And in a way, I was trying to step away from that journalistic approach of documentary filmmaking, and just trying to switch and invert the roles. So I would like to define it as a self-cartography. Is deeply connected with storytelling. Of course, my experience
A self-cartography?
yeah, like kind of like mapping your own body, like not letting
Okay.
you know, others to, you know, analyze you as an object of study, but ourselves taking control of the narrative, because that documentary touches me on a very personal level. So as a racialized man, I am in a way dealing with my own process of you know, debating my own issues with coloniality and masculinity while I'm doing this. You know, it's not like I am just going to an totally unrelated community and experience, and I'm just being kind of like curious about something that doesn't belong to my own experience. So as you mentioned, I think I'm coming, of course, from a very I'm deeply connected to hip hop culture, and in a way, everything that I do as a musician has the same approach. I try to not just be like superficially deep or superficially conscious in certain ways, but I try to go deep into the analysis, to do critical analysis of everything that I do as an artist. So I think visually this is just a reflection of what I do as a rapper as well, you know.
I mean, even that word, a self-cartography, is that the word?
Cartography.
Self-cartography.
Yeah.
When I was watching your last discussion between Professor Marco and Bocafloja, and I was thinking back to when I first met you at the hip hop festival, and you know, I'm doing my stage dive, and then I'm jumping off stage to my vending table right away. Because for those who don't know what happens when you're a performer, especially when it's crowds that might not know you before, right after you get off stage, they want to buy your merch, they want to buy your shirts. 10 minutes later, half the people want to buy your stuff. 30 minutes later, a couple people. An hour later, you just a random person in the crowd, right?
Yeah.
So you get off the stage, you go right to that merch table, like that's the moment. And I think we both had our tables next to each other, and so like I got the pleasure of meeting you early on in your festival experience, and just watching your videos through the years. Your music videos, right? More than I didn't actually know about the documentary ones until very recently. But your music videos, just been like, yo, that's my brother right there. He's a dope artist. Like, proud he's in the constellation shining. But I remember in that first festival, the way I perceived it, you tell me if I'm way off. The way I perceived it, you weren't extremely fluent in English.
Yeah.
And then, watching you be the most heavily attended scholar artist panel on this, and I'm like, not only are you speaking in a way that Professor Markle understands from academia, but like you're speaking beyond the erudite limits of the English language that most in academia can't access, right? So
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, self-cartography. Even right now, I gotta go like Google this and understand it more. How much of hip hop? And first of all, tell me if I'm completely wrong. And you always spoke like that, but I'm like, yo, this brother mastered the language to a degree unparalleled. Like he mastered MCing. If that's true, what part of being a hip hop artist and fan helped you like just own the language? Helped you own the language, being a hip hop artist, especially a lyrical MC hip hop artist.
Yeah, and let me interject. Is that and was your approach, mastering the master's language in order to tear it down? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, you're totally right. At that time, I was still living in Mexico. I went to the festival straight from Mexico City. I was still living in Mexico, so it's like my understanding of the language was good enough to have like basic conversations, and I was always like a student of the lyrics. And my first motivation to learn the language was hip hop itself. I was always like reading the lyrics and trying to understand like the metaphors and the use of language and so on. But once I moved to the US, I realized one very important route for me to develop as an artist was to engage in academic dialogues and contribute in that capacity. So I was supposed to step my game up when it comes to expressing myself in a level that could be quite similar to the way I express myself in Spanish. And by saying this, I am, as Professor Seth was saying, like I am not defending language as some sort of like nationalist type of dynamic, but I'm just utilizing it as a tool and trying to switch that as a possibility of anti-colonial part as a part of an anti-colonial possibility, when expressing myself. So definitely.
And you're reminiscing and stuff. But I remember I went with Bocafloja and a Trinity student to Schomburg Center. Shout out to Martha Diaz, Hip Hop and Higher Learning. We presented, if you remember that, Bocafloja. And I remember you pulling me aside and asking me about PhD programs in African diaspora. And I wasn't super shocked, but I didn't expect that question from you. Where you're like, yo, man, you talked about PhD programs, and I was like, well, I want to go to PhD programs or look into PhD programs here in the U.S. So I was like, oh, bet. So I'm trying to put together the pieces too.
Yeah.
When thinking about this story, which is really interesting. So I've seen the trajectory as well, where and Suffice and I were talking about this, where it's totally hip hop. Hip hop's about mastering vocabulary, the mindset, right? It's about, and so even in academic spaces, it's this mastering of vocabulary. The vocabulary that you use has very specific meaning, right? Neocolonialism, imperial, and colonialism aren't the same thing, right? In terms, but I think a lot of people use them interchangeably. So it's just like really important to have that language. One of the things, to go back to the film, is that, and in the other ways I feel the ways in which you're challenging structure, is that it doesn't have like some happy ending. There's no, I found the object, here's the conclusion, about the object of study. So hip hop in Cuba, and here we are, done. Hip hop in Cuba, they're doing great stuff. You're picking this very complicated, ongoing issue about colonial legacy, identity, internalized racism, internalized patriarchies, right? And so that doesn't have an end.
Yeah.
And so in most films, you want to leave as an audience member, as a passive audience member, with some sort of conclusion, right?
Yeah.
You pick something that doesn't have a conclusion. Could you talk a little bit about that, like the ending of the film?
Yeah, I think it starts with the fact that the narrative itself is not linear, so there's not like a
Right.
very specific beginning and ending and the climax of the film, because I think, as you mentioned, the it's a current issue, and it's more as an exercise of contextualizing historically where we're standing right now, and kind of like instigate or motivate political possibilities and political imaginaries in a way to deal with those type of situations. So there's not an actual solution in real life when it comes to those
Right.
dialogues, but you know, more than anything, is just another political possibility to,
Right.
reflect on that issue. So there's
Right.
a specific ending.
Yeah, no doubt. Spice, you got it?
I
Yeah.
think I do feel like there was in this like and just to continue like mastering vocabulary for the B girls and B boys, that's a physical vocabulary. For the graph writers, that's a visual vocabulary. But either way, you're mastering this vocabulary and then doing this really extreme work of not having a conclusion, but having a better cipher, having a better ongoing cipher, which means you're able to see people who are in whatever forms of oppression or victory in the areas of sex, drugs, violence, and money. You're able to expand the conversation about who they are in the context of peace, love, unity, and fun. So you're not criminalizing anyone. You're not saying like, okay, that's the end of you. And you're not really upholding anyone and saying like, this is our leader. You're kind of saying, this is how the cipher continues. And since I mastered the vocabulary and the use of it, you know that I'm going to be in the cipher, whether you like it or not. And I'm going to give you a chance to respond in the cipher, whether I like it or not at the time. And I feel like continuing through the lens of the MC in hip hop, like I feel like you won that battle. You know what I mean? Like not only did you not take on like a colonial type of language and appearance to take on being the next master, it was like you won the battle. You know what I mean? Like you can speak to an academic. They can't like see you on the side and say, oh, that was cute. But now as we move on with our dissertation and further juxtapose this analogous concept, you know what I mean? Like you're going to be right there like, yeah, but the problem with that conjecture, you know what I'm saying? So it's like you're battling. To me, it's like you're battling in academia. You didn't just find a way to like be a better MC. You found a way to use the principles of hip hop to expand the cipher, right? The where hip hop is existing. So if I could move on, I want to talk about some of what that journey is like for you now, having done this film. What was you talked about this in the interview, but just for people who are going to go watch it after this, what was the meaning behind the name? Why did you juxtapose the terms? And what is it that you didn't like about yourself, or you saw room for improvement in yourself as exploring this topic? And what is it that you maybe had to give yourself credit for that you didn't even know in this topic that you had to stop and give yourself credit for? And what is it that you had to stop and say, damn, I need to do better at this?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, at some point I felt it was necessary to assume the responsibility of having those dialogues and doing that political work through art, because coming from again hip hop culture, which historically has been dominated in terms of visibility and power by men, it was important to have a conversation about the way colonialism shaped the way we socially function in terms of gender, and question our masculinity. It's very necessary. I've been dealing with a lot of personal issues when it comes to mental health, and masculinity was some of the factors that somehow, some way, stopped me from even being vocal about those issues, because it was not permissible according to the way my masculinity was shaped. Growing up in a place like Mexico City, then living in the Bronx, there's a certain pattern when it comes to the way we project this masculinity, which I define mostly as some sort of performance. So it is quite complicated. So I was trying to utilize my artistic platform to socialize that work, that process, that experience. And when it comes to the name of the documentary itself, I mean, it's not that complicated. I think it's just a juxtaposition of those terms that are stereotypically associated to, first of all, the magenta, the color, stereotypically associated to womanhood, or to women, as to femininity, and bravado as part of that performance of masculinity. So kind of like putting them together and utilize it as a metaphor of a permanent confrontation, of a battle, of a conflict, and whatnot.
Right, right. Yeah, I really appreciate that. We just got one more question, and then we got to move on to our next guest. But I was wondering if you can, we touched on it a little bit. I was wondering if you can expand, just for the sake of the theme of this show around the festival. You've been part of this festival in your career throughout different moments of your career. You've come to the festival from the, starting out to in the game for a while with some album videos, to now a filmmaker. Can you just talk about the Trinity National Hip Hop Festival as a platform for you as an artist, and what it's been, what it's done for you?
It's been a blessing, to be very honest. The festival has been very, very a crucial space for me to build not only artistic connection, but also friendships, creative lab, some sort of an epicenter of different experiences with people from all over the world. Some of my most important projects, to one way or the other, were generated in those experiences. So every time I go back to the festival, it's some sort of family reunion. A lot of people that I admire, I've witnessed their evolution as artists, as human beings. I've seen families grow within the context of that same community. It's been really beautiful. I most of the people that I've interacted with artistically at some point went through that festival or were related to the festival. So I think as an experience is unique in the context of the US, because first of all, just by the name itself, is decentralizing this idea of the United States as the primary epicenter of hip hop culture, but it's already like having the discussion of understanding hip hop as a larger experience that is more connected to different diasporic narratives and the international perspective, which for me is fundamental, and is more connected to its original essence. So it's been beautiful for me. It's always a blessing, and I'm always grateful to be part of it.
Yeah, we really appreciate you. We do have to close out. We have been talking with Bocafloja, artist, filmmaker, the director of Bravado Magenta, a film about decoloniality, identity, masculinity, which was featured at the 15th International Hip Hop Festival. You can check it out for free on YouTube. With my co-host here, Kaim the Rap Poet. Rob, you got any last words, my brother? You're on mute, brother.
I just want to say, you're an example of hip hop, and you're an example of I was interviewing Poison Pen from Bragging Rights and Smack, and Pumpkinhead's crew and Sean Price and all these legendary. He's another person that brings all these people together in hip hop across the world. And he was just talking about, like, once he was putting out music and once he was winning battles, he got to a point where he wanted to give others that platform. And what else can I do besides just beating people in battles? So you're just another great example of that. Thank you for reminding us that we are also filmmakers and chefs and conversationalists and changers and deconstructors of ourselves, able to come back into Cypher in a different way. I look forward to our next collaboration in whatever form it is. And saying that to you, it might be a film, you know, it might be a track that we spit in bars, but it might be a film. But whatever it is, it's an honor to know you, and I'm inspired, you know, when I think of you.
Thank you, brother. I really
Thank you, brother.
Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you.
All right.
Later.
All right. Stay in touch, fam. Bless you.
Yep.